So honestly, when I was asked which is your favorite film, I thought about it, and most of the films that I could remember were these super what shall I say, like super obscure films that nobody has ever seen, kind of shot in the Mongolian deserts. And so I'm not sure. So when I tried to answer this question, I'm not sure that Kala is necessarily my favorite film, but it's definitely the film that has inspired me tremendously in the last couple of years. It's been the film that I think at a point when I was feeling pretty much like I was questioning my own role within the film industry, I think it really gave me some direction. And I think that it's a very, very courageous film. Um, uh, I think one of the things that inspired me about the film is that it's very difficult. One of the questions that I've always dealt with in my own life is how do you make a film that talks politics? How do you make a film that is strong and courageous and stands up and is not niche? A lot of the films that do center themselves around political subjects or controversial subjects also tend to become very niche films. And I think that in my own journey, I've tried to marry my interest in documentary films with my desire for a larger audience to watch those stories, because I think those stories are important, and I think that that's something that Kala achieved. Is that, and I think that this director in general has been able to marry the grammar of kind of mass films with really important stories and important subjects. So I think for everybody, I think there's a lot of us who want to make political films, and it's very hard to do in this climate. And it was incredible to see somebody who actually went out and did that. So I want to say something before we sort of dive into that. I think that many years ago, when I was first introduced to Ambedkarite politics, and it was by way of a short story. And essentially, in that short story, what this young boy, the character in the story, what he says is that I never see myself as a hero on screen, you know. And um, generally, with disenfranchised communities and marginalized communities, we tend to slot them as, victims, hapless persons, people who need to be rescued. And certainly that paradigm evokes sympathy and it evokes empathy, and that's important. But I think it's equally important to be able to let people empower themselves and to be able to see people from disenfranchised communities, from marginalized communities, um, uh, see themselves not just in the role of somebody who is being saved, but also the savior. I think that what is really incredible about Kala is that it turns the lens. So it turns the lens from a lens which looks at marginalized communities and people who need to be saved to people, human beings, individuals, and within those individuals, there are heroes. And I think that for me, Karikalan's character, and coming to the question that you asked, I think that not only does it flip the lens on the Dalit community, but also I think this film flips the lens on what is an oft used narrative tool, which is the David versus Goliath story. I think this isn't just a David versus Goliath story. It's actually a story where David becomes Goliath himself, where David grows, almost sort of enlarges himself, and becomes that all empowering, omniscient figure. And to that extent, I think Karikalan's character is actually a very uniquely written character for Indian cinema. I think it's important that the film isn't just political in its story. The film is very political in its mise en scene, and it's very deliberate. Every single thing in the film, particularly the production design. So if you see the film a couple of times over, you start noticing those patterns. You see, from the books on the table, a lot of them are written by Ambedkar. To something as simple as the background of the square where a lot of the action happens. If you look in the far background, there's a A1 beef shop, you know, These are all like little lines of code that are written into the story, and you can watch the film just for the narrative at the superficial level, or you can watch the film from. You can also watch the film to really see what this filmmaker is saying, not just about the story, but also about the politics and about Dalit Ambedkarite politics. Um, in response to your question, I think it's also interesting to learn that or interesting to understand or engage with the idea that Lenin, the son, he represents the left, right? And he represents a certain idea, a certain way in which things are supposed to be done in quotes. That's what we always, even those of us who are sympathetic, we kind of have this idea that there is still a way to do things. I think that this film turns that on its head. And I think what it essentially says is that communities should be allowed to decide for themselves how their reformation happens, how their reform happens, how their empowerment happens. Nobody else should get to decide that this is the way that the Dalit community, this is the way that Dalit people should resist. This is their decision, and I think that as a larger kind of meta point, it's important to acknowledge the fact that it's time to pass the mic. I mean, sure. Like I think that the everything that you see in the film is very deliberate. There's nothing by chance. There's nothing by accident. So every one of the characters, the choice of using Huma Qureshi at a one is that you choose somebody at a narrative level, and the other is that you choose somebody at a subconscious level. She is an outsider. She's an outsider in the film, and she's an outsider in the perception of people who are going to be watching that film. Of course, even the choice of someone like Nana Patekar, you need someone who's going to be able to stand up to, it is not easy being in the frame with somebody like Rajinikanth. He is as he's as obviously a superstar as is possible. And I think that the fact that, in a film like that, it's also always possible to get somebody else who's like a big name, star, whatever. But what you need is that you need somebody who's going to be able to going to be able to push back, against that's the only when you have a relevant villain, then the hero is fun, right? And I think that, all that I would basically say with regards to the casting is that it's incredibly down to, I think, even the supporting cast, the son, it's very deliberate. I do think that films are a platform, and I do think that most of the choices we make are political. Whether we decide to be apolitical, that's also a political choice. Yeah. I think that the times and the world that we live in demand, actually, that we engage more and more. I think that a recent film that I really loved was Thappad. I don't know if people see it in terms of the larger sort of extremely strongly feminist statement that it's made, because it's not actually just about the slap. It's a lot of it is about the other conversations that have happened around the film, and the things. And when you have the heroes and heroines of your films say those things, it makes a huge difference. It's how you normalize, it's how you mainstream an important idea. And I think that a film like Thappad really did that.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this video, and if you like what we do, follow us on our socials and check out our other uploads.